Welcome to the Provider Podcast, everyone. Coming at you on a glorious Coromandel Day. And I'm very, very stoked to have a very special guest on the show today. And that is Scott Macindoe from LegaSea, someone who I've got immense respect for. Welcome, Scott.
Good, Carl.
How are we today?
Dangerously good.
Excellent.
Big walk this morning. Thank you, Alan Davidson, who's taken me under his bloody arm and getting me off my fat ass and out in the streets of Tamaki Makaurau. Feeling good.
Nice. Now, I would hazard a guess most people listening or watching this podcast will know some of the tireless work that Scott has done on our behalf as recreational fishermen. I want to say, first of all, thank you very much, Scott. Huge respect. You've been someone who's been very successful in business, and then a lot of your work in LegaSea has been putting your own time and money in behind campaigning for recreational fishermen. So I want to say thank you. And I want to start off, I hazard a guess that I'm not going to do much of the talking today because I've been fortunate to hear you talk a few times, and I know how passionate you are. And I'm going to start the ball rolling by asking, I think, a pertinent question which relates to this podcast is, you know, you give a lot of your time and resources to fight this cause. I want to start off by asking, what does it mean for you to be a provider?
I get purpose from this cause, this business of standing up for ourselves, of making the decision to act. It's all about restored abundance and a fair go for future generations of New Zealanders. That's what I've reduced it to for me. And yeah, on a daily basis, I wake up feeling like I've got a good day ahead of me, a purposeful day. I get to thank my mother and father for the fantastic start that they gave me. The longer I do this, the more I realize how beautiful my upbringing was, how much we just took it all for granted, the abundance and the treasures that we were able to harvest and share with friends and family, and the funny little trading arrangements we had going on for field mushrooms and bloody dairy farmers in Albany. Were pretty lucky to know my mother. They got a steady diet of crayfish, and we ate a shit ton of field mushrooms and blackberries and fresh cream. It was just a beautiful childhood, and I'm really grateful. And it's an opportunity for me to say thank you, Bill Macindoe and Janet Lawney, good bastards. Being able to share my catch, which is pretty rare these days because once were warriors. I've lost my mojo a little bit when it comes to catching fish so much. I get given a lot of fish, so it's all sides of a square, really. My mate Sonny Toe coined the phrase maximum mana enhancement. That's how he would describe the bin of fish that he would take home after we'd been together for a few days. His wife would ring me up and say, "Where are the fish?" And of course, the bugger has given them away on the way home. Not fish for you. And for him to be able to stand at the door and give a kuia koma to a kahawai or a snapper that he'd caught tripping with ice, that was maximum mana enhancement. So I'm into that. I get a great deal of self-esteem from sharing my catch. If I've got a 26 centimeter snapper that's gut hooked, well, I'm still bringing them home, and I'm still carrying them up the road and I call them Elaine as they come aboard, because Elaine is the woman who's been looking after our street here in Newmarket for 40 years. And it gives me a sense of real purpose and mana to take that small snapper up and fillet it for her while her cat's climbing up the back of my legs, and bloody, she gets a pot full of heads and a head and a bell and a throat, and I've got a bag of guts and gills, and she's delighted. It's not just the fish that she's appreciating, it's the conversation, it's the acknowledgement, it's that opportunity to have a bit of relationship with an old person, and that's facilitated for me by providing her with a small snapper, and I sort of get to look myself in the mirror and say, yeah, it's okay to break the rule and bring home that undersized fish. One day I'll get caught and probably busted quite badly for having a gut hooked undersized fish. Personally, I think it's a ridiculous rule, and I hate, with the thing I hate most is letting a dead fish go and children saying, what's that about? You know, it's such a bullshit thing to do. And why I'm not allowed to retain one small fish to allow for unavoidable mortality, and it does my head in. But that's the silly system we're in, the quota management system, which has rendered us almost paralyzed, almost incapable of doing anything smart, intelligent, respectful. We're not allowed to be complex. It's just this one size fits all crap that we have to deal with called the amateur bag limit regulations. Blah, blah. I digress. That's what it means for me to be a provider.
Yeah, I had a pretty amazing experience yesterday, Scott, since we last talked, and I took a client out. He's been out with me before, and yesterday he brought along two young boys. One was 14, one was 11. And the reason this fella, his name is Gavin, a real good bugger, reason he brought these lads out is last year their dad passed away of a brain tumor. So he was taking them out to continue the good work that their dad had done, taking them out on the water and showing them the ways and catching, good kai. And what an amazing day! What an amazing bunch of boys to have on the boat, and it was just so amazing to see the big smiles on their faces when they hooked up on some kingies and brought them aboard and got their photos and managed to take some nice kai home. And just got a lovely message Gavin sent through today, just saying the boys on their way home last night were saying it's one of the best days of their life. And to me that's what fishing is all about. It's reconnecting, especially young people, back to what life's all about and being part of nature.
What a big ups to Gavin. Massive. I mean, what an example. Thank you, Gavin. That really puts the ball in front of the forwards, raises the bar for me. I've never done that. Well, I've in my own boat, but I've never actually consciously arranged a charter to take, and all of us know people like those kids that Gavin was looking after. They don't have to be kids. All of us have got people in our lives who could do with a shot in the arm. When was the last time one of us actually just said, right, I'm dedicating a day and a few bucks to those people? Because you're dead right. What a fantastic thing to do. Wow. Beautiful. Thank you, Gavin.
I think what I especially love about seeing kids come out on the water is just their sense of knowing where their food was. And you shared an article with me, Scott, when we're chatting a couple of days ago. It's something that you said got the ball rolling on the Kai Ika Project. So your project to better utilize the whole fish and the fish heads and frames that are coming into boat ramps, specifically up in Auckland. And this article is all about where does food come from? So that's my next question, is where does food come from? And maybe tell us a little bit about Kai Ika and the process.
Okay, well, for anyone listening to this podcast, grab your pen and write down KFC marae. That'll take you straight to this Herald article featuring the Papa Tuanuku Kokiri marae and its leader, Lionel Hotune and Val Teraitua. So there's a couple of inspirational people. They and their whole family have committed themselves to helping their community or communities, multiple communities, reconnect with food, real food. What does real food look like? And they're growing kumara, lots of kumara. They've got a piece of dirt in Mangere and Robertson Road, and they're doing it old school. This is 5 years ago, and it has just steadily expanded and become more and more and more intense. The product is immaculate. They sell it at the Grey Lynn Farmers Market. They've got Peter Gordon with his new remarkable restaurant and cooking school infrastructure down at Westhaven called Homeland. If you're in Auckland, do yourselves a favor, go down to Homeland and check it out. You've got the best chef in the history of New Zealand on the floor showing people how to do stuff. It's quite incredible. So they're supplying all of his or most of his vegetables and herbs and so forth. So this article a fluke on my part, just talked about the tragedy that is the food poverty in South Auckland, the highest rate of diabetes, food-related illnesses, blindness, amputations, early death, eating crap food, fast food. It's cheap, it's really tasty. We all know how good it is. I mean, I still do it from time to time, even though I'm filled with self-loathing and remorse as I smash that second bloody piece of junk into my bloody face. Wrong. KFC, McDonald's, Carl Jr., Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, they're on every corner in Mangere. So they're out there doing kumara. I at that moment, I was aware of the Outboard Boating Club struggling to get rid of the offal from their filleting station. And they had a leader, John Lawrence, who was trying to figure out how to help his members make the club more relevant, etc. And they just were struggling with the offal disposal. So I had a bit of a brain explosion and rang up the marae and said, how would you like 80,000 Tāmure heads to go with your 80,000 kumaras? They didn't really get it. I came into the marae a few days later and met them. And that's where I have to acknowledge the Ngāpuhi for taking us, I'm talking Sport Fishing Council, the Option 4 team, taking us under their wing. Ngāpuhi, Sunny Toe, Judah Heihei, Nada Glavish, a whole lot of beautiful Māori leaders who took us up to Whitiora Marae in 2005. They said, we know most of what there is to know about you. We know what you like eating. We know where you send your kids to school. We know how you tick. You haven't got much of an idea about how we operate, how us Maoris travel. So would you like to have an insight? So we had 3 days on the marae, 20 of us. And we understood when we came away, we had an insight into karakia and the fundamental importance of waiata, the gift of song. It's indelible. We've had 18 overnight hui with those guys since then and come to call ourselves the Hokianga Accord. You can find that online. So with that training insight under my belt, I was able to hit poor old Lionel and Val with a bit of a mihi whakatau, a whai kōrero, and a respectful introduction, and then smash them with my waiata. I've still only got one song, but I'm pretty good at the old te araha, Oh my te atua. It's a beautiful thing to be able to sing after you've spoken on a marae, and that set them off, and they came back at me, and I tell you, my spine was tingling. It was a very emotional and beautiful way to meet. And 5 years later, we're rocking. We're getting this Kai Ika really flowing along. The OBC founding partner, fantastic. We're filleting fish down there now for club members. We've opened a filleting station at Westhaven, which we're confident will be a winning formula. It's been tentative this summer. Next summer, it's going to be dynamic. And it's also a place where people can drop off their heads and frames, knowing that they're going to get the right treatment and find a really beautiful recipient. When COVID nailed us all last year, of course, we were on the beach. We weren't allowed to go fishing. So we turned to Moana, and they came aboard, and their support just gets better and better. And now Sanford and Scott Seafood are giving us heads and frames. So we're doing 2,000 kgs in a good week. Wow. In the middle of winter. And demand is ramping up. It's not slowing down. There's, one of the issues was, what are you going to do with 2 tons of fish heads? As the word gets out, demand is going through the roof. So come this summer, the Kai Ika Project, still in proof of concept, still costing a lot of money. Thank you, Foundation North, Auckland Council, Ministry for the Environment, Ministry for Social Development. We've had the Bobby Stafford Bush Foundation. What a beautiful couple. Brian and Paddy Stafford Bush tragically lost their son, Bobby, and they set up this living foundation to remember him. They came to us and said, we like what you're doing. What can we do? $20-something thousand later, we've got a 3-ton refrigerated truck.
Awesome.
Bingo. So it's that sort of, I heard yesterday that a church group in South Auckland has just committed $10,000 a year indefinitely.
Wow.
And it's that sort of support, recurring revenue, that allows for us to really stretch our wings and to see what we really can do. The event trailer is underway, so we will be available to attend fishing events, contests, Whitianga Sustainable Seafood event coming up, Raglan Dairy Farmers in December. Again, no, those fishermen will pay to have their fish filleted expertly. Here's a riddle for you, Carl. You've got 3 40-centimetre snapper and your favourite knife. How long does it take you to knock 6 fillets off those fish beautifully, no waste? 3 40-centimetre snapper. Back yourself, bro.
I'd say 4 or 5 minutes, maybe.
Well, if you're in Auckland, just come down and watch Dave Ahoya in action. 3 40-centimetre snappers. My money's on 40 seconds.
Yeah, wow.
If you can find anything left behind on that frame, you get your money back.
Yeah. What a great service, eh? And it's I love that all those fish heads are going to a great cause. Personally, I love eating them myself. And one thing we do on our retreats is show the guys that come along on one of the evenings after we've been out fishing how to utilize the whole fish. And one of my favorite ways is to roast the head first, sit there and pick all the goodness off the head and the frame and the wings. Then anything that is inedible after that goes in the stock pot and gets broken down with some celery leaves and carrot and onion and turmeric and ginger and garlic and other goodness, and that's the base of our stock for our chowder that night. And think the last one we had a whole lot of goodies to throw in with the stock to make our chowder, like some crayfish and snapper and other goodness. But there's nothing. I after we'd made the base stock last time, I gave all the guys a coffee mug of it and said, look, that's that good. You can actually drink it. It's actually a bloody nice drink in its own right.
You make it hungry.
Yeah. I being a charter operator as well, I get to live off fish heads myself. And the family does it. It's amazing how many nights you can live off just one blue nose head and frame and wings, for example.
In our conversation the other day, I took away a trick you shared with me, replacing the white sauce in the fish pie with a blended pureed cauliflower.
Yeah.
Boom. Wow.
How good and how good for you, all those nutrients, vitamins and minerals from the cauliflower through adding to the goodness of your protein and fat from the fish, smoked fish. How good.
I mean, it's a bit like a golf shot, really, isn't it? The more you do it, the more lessons you have, the better you get.
Yeah.
And as we reduce these heads and frames in our fish stock, we're now slowly reducing the amount of water we put into it.
Yeah.
And we've only sent one batch away so far for nutritional analysis, and come back with a fantastic fat content, much greater than a fillet. And I was disappointed with the protein content. I thought we'd get bigger recovery out of all the collagen that makes up the fin, skins, and all those parts around the fin mechanisms. There's a lot of meat that we can't get at to eat, and around the tail. So we're just bringing our water content down now, where we were putting 4.5 liters into 10. We were putting 20 kgs of unwanted fish parts in the stock pot, 4.5 liters of water in, and getting 10.5 liters of stock back. So the fish were letting go of a lot of goodness. And obviously we're losing a fair bit to steam.
Steam, yeah.
We're now down to between 3 and 4 liters of water. Yeah. And I think we'll probably finish up at around about 3 liters for 20 kgs of fish parts. And then I'll have a crack at it. We'll have another go at a nutritional analysis. What I'm fantasizing about is producing a product that is equal to or greater than the fillet itself.
Yeah.
There's a formula there. There's a sweet spot. We all know that the skinned and boned recovery on a snapper is about 38%, if you know what you're doing. Other fish can be higher, some can be lower. So there's 60% or 50%, if you like, of the fish that we, never mind the gills and the guts, although we do have to go after those gold bars, don't we? Those fish roe. Oh my golly gosh. And by the way, those fish roe freeze beautifully.
Yeah, 100%.
And all you need is a little or a big steamer container in your deep freeze, and you just stack them in. I've been fishing today. I've only got 2 or 3, 4 rows. We'll stick them in on top of the last lot you caught. Don't be precious. Put the lid back on. When you thaw them out, chuck in a couple of tablespoons of salt and sugar and stir them up and smoke that lot. It's as if you've caught them the day before.
Yeah.
They freeze better than any other part of the fish, I suppose.
Well, they've got a very good protective membrane on the outside of the roe, haven't they?
I can't get enough of those gold bars. Why can't we find that element of the fish in the fish shop? What's going on? All I'm seeing are these charisma-free stainless steel trays of white gapping, skinned and boned ground fish for sale, monkfish, hoki, red cod, trevally. It's embarrassing when I look at what we are being offered in the retail environment.
Yeah.
The question is, where's the roe? Where's the kahawai roe? I've never ever seen a trevally roe offered for sale. Incoming calls. Sorry, Brian Furman. Amazing man, Brian Furman from Furman's Marine. You know, he's the only man in the world to hold down a Yamaha and Mercury prime agency profile boats. There you go, Brian. One for one of the best and most staunch supporters of this business of standing up for ourselves. He's a wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I'm just having a quick moan about why can't these commercial fish processing retailing organizations listen to us? Why can't they start making a fish head available for sale? A kingfish head.
Yeah.
Or a blue nose head. It's
Yeah.
no bloody good throwing them in the bin. We've got to start demanding a bit more respect and intelligence and consciousness, not just across the board, because that's the solution. Utilization is a big part of the conservation we are all going to have to bring to the table if we want restored abundance.
Yeah.
We're all going to have to pull our head in now, big time, and just get our heads around some dramatically reduced daily bag limits or total allowable commercial catches, whatever. We've just got to pull the pin on this ridiculousness of quota management, this ridiculousness of body count, counting piles of dead animals and calling that fisheries management.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. We all know hapuka and bass are in crisis. Tarakihi, Trevally, John Dory, Gurnard, Porai, Kahawai. We have, hello, bloody old, is he still talking? Oh, I've still got the bugger on hold. That's 2 minutes. Oh, Brian, bad luck. I hope you got that bloody big ups I just gave you. I'm doing a podcast. I'm live. So let me call you back, Brian. Thank you. That's a bit of humor. So just as well I said nice things about him. Yeah, so we're all going to have to start coming to terms with a freeze. The best the government can offer us is a freeze on the existing trawl footprint or the existing dredge footprint. That's their idea of restoring abundance. Otherwise, there's no evidence of any willingness to really come to terms with the fact that we are in crisis.
Yeah.
And we need to constrain dramatically if we are to enjoy restored abundance.
Yeah, like it's very apparent for me because I live up on a hill, and if I look that way, I'm looking straight out over the Pacific Ocean, and I'm also out there a lot, and so I see what's going on, and I see the amount of trawler traffic right on my back doorstep, and it just actually does my head in. Like specifically when it comes to, I think Tarakihi are a great example because they're so easily plundered by trawl nets out there because of the nature of where Tarakihi sit on the edge of reefs, right on the edge of pretty much where the mud meets the hard bottom. And it's madness for me. Like there's no commercial fishing out of Tairua. So Tairua as a community, apart from crayfish fishermen, so we've got Shorty who goes out and he's got a good sustainable business there catching crayfish. There's no other commercial fishing out of Tairua. There is no economic benefit to our town from any trawlers running past any of our reefs with trawl nets. What's it going to take, Scott, do you think, for us to get back to common sense whereby we might have a few boats landing fish in Tairua and that fish being accessible to locals? Like all of our restaurants buy their fish from Auckland. It's all caught out here. It goes to Auckland and then it gets struck down here. So to me, it just makes it, when the government's talking about taxing diesel utes and for climate change, just makes absolutely no sense to me. When like even Shorty's crayfish, for example, the restaurant across the road from him can't buy them. They get all their crayfish from Nelson. His crayfish go to Whitianga, get swum in tanks, and then they get put on a plane and air freighted to China. Like, if we really want to knock climate change on the head, surely we need to look at where our food's transported around the planet and around the country.
Okay, listeners, let's be clear. Carl started it. You just ripped the scab off the biggie. You know, how do we break out of the inertia? How do we get some common sense? How do we see fish being consumed by Kiwis, caught locally, consumed locally? We're not talking about any sort of a bargain. We're happy to pay. How do we get our whole system reset? Is that your question?
Pretty much. How do we get back to common sense? Someone going and catching fish out there and selling it to locals and local restaurants.
Right. I will try to give you the short version. In 2015, the ministry invited everyone to submit on a review of fisheries management systems. We debated hard with officials here at HQ in Auckland, and they finally agreed that, yes, the entire act was so inextricably entwined and interconnected that it needed to be reviewed as a whole, not in part, not just mucking about on the margin with things like discards or dumping and the deem value regime, and of course the camera regime. That was where they wanted to focus this review of fisheries management. And we said, no, it goes much, much deeper than that. In the end, they sort of capitulated. I think really just to get out of the room and escape back to Wellington. So we duly submitted in good faith, and that submission in January 2016, I commend to you to read, and you'll find that on the New Zealand Sport Fishing Council website and the LegaSea website. That was dismissed as being out of scope in 2016. And it was a moment in time when we realized, we're buggered. Here we are, we've done 16 years of pretty intense engagement and participation. We're in every science working group. We're in every fisheries management, highly migratory species, the Northern Inshore, the Southern Inshore, the Aquatic Environment, National Rock Lobster Management Group, you name it. The Sport Fishing Council are in the room, sitting there, participating, fully engaged. We're pretty much alone now in terms of those arguing abundance and non-commercial fishing interests. The green NGOs have sort of drifted off by and large, although I'm hopeful that they'll make a comeback. It's expensive. It's really expensive. And that's where all the LegaSea Legend money, all the unaffiliated club money, and about a third of the affiliation fees that the Sport Fishing Council clubs pay, that goes into the Fisheries Management Standing Committee budget. And it's built over the years to about $300,000 a year we invest in this business of fisheries advocacy. And suddenly, here we are, 2016, being dismissed as being out of scope. There's not a single word that we resile. That is 100% relevant, that submission. And it was just binned. So we realized then that we needed to actually, and then we discovered this bloke, Milton Friedman, economist, where he talks like this: only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. When that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend upon the ideas that are lying around. That, I believe, is our basic function, to develop alternatives to existing policies, to hold them alive and available until the politically impossible becomes the politically inevitable. Bit of a mouthful, but I tell you, it's the only thing that keeps me here in this batting crease, holding this line. It's about either develop an alternative or get off the bus, because there's no bloody point in making faces and making howling, anguished sounds if you ain't got something constructive, positive, solution-based. So off we went into the world. We sent Mike Barner and Barry Torkington and Josh Barclay into North America, Canada, Scandinavia, the Faroe Islands, Iceland, and we spent a month. Mike Barner has got 28 hours of documentary grade footage in the tin. It's astonishing. Yeah. Some of you will have seen The Price of Fish documentary. I think we've used 20 minutes of that 28 hours of high quality stuff. Amazing interviews with people in Iceland and the Faroe and Canada. Remarkable. Stand by for the sequel, which will be called Rescue Fish, because that is what we've come up with over the 2017, 18, 19, culminating in August 2019 when we went into Stuart Nash, Minister, into his office and very politely and professionally tabled an alternative to the quota management system. Yep. In good faith. No stunts, no clever bullshit. $1 million invested, real money. Economic impact assessment to bring a tear to your glass eye. Peter Wilson, thank you. 10 years Treasury, Director of Taxation Policy, Chief Economist, New Zealand Institute of Economic Research. He started his game and saying, yeah, I'll take your money and play your silly game. 18 months later, he'd taken the money, all right, about 3 times what we started with. The scope expanded. The dividend, a very high quality piece of economic impact assessment, and a high-end economist who's a bit of a born again. He's like, wow, this is reform that needs to happen. It's the no-brainer. It ought to happen. It's so much better for Aotearoa than this status quo of the feudal quota management system, which is seeing the fisheries decimated. Yeah. It's seeing the fishermen on the bones of their ass. Yeah. There's no wealth. There's a bit of wealth, but it ain't on the waterfront. It's seeing us as consumers treated like fools, fed this, as I described it earlier, a charisma-free mediocrity. There's nothing glamorous about the fish on offer in our supermarkets. It's embarrassing.
Yeah, I have to agree.
We go into a restaurant and we get price on application or market fish of the day because there's no certainty, there's no supply chain, there's no relationship between the restaurant and the fisherman. So until the fisherman owns the fish he catches, we're buggered. Yeah. As long as the fisherman is a serf in a feudal system, obliged to sell his catch to a licensed fish receiver who's also providing the entitlement, the annual catch entitlement, which is derived from what we used to call quota. It's now called shares in the total allowable commercial catch. As long as we've got that nonsense of that disconnect, we're not going to get the stewardship. We're not going to get the respectful catching methods. We're not going to get the relationship between the fisherman and the restaurateur or the shopkeeper or the club. We're not going to be eating fish. We're just going to be reading statistics that are bizarre. Yeah. The trevally, our number one most favorite fish. Do you know, Carl, that we as a sector, the public, catch around about 200 tons of trevally per annum, give or take? It doesn't really matter. So what if it's 250 or 180? It's definitely not 250, I can tell you that. We catch about 250 tons. The commercial entitlement is 3,000 tons. They can only catch 2,000 tons, no matter how hard they try, with their spotter planes and filthy purse seiners. And then they export year after year after year, 800 tons. That's 4 times what you and I are catching. Frozen, whole, no added value, no quality, no respect, no bloody intelligence. and they go to the Saudi Arabia, the United Kingdom, and France year after year after year. I don't know the names of the people who are buying them. I doubt if they're choir boys. I can tell you that for free. And they're paying about $3 a kilo.
Wow.
On whole.
That's a disgrace, really, isn't it?
Oh, it's just mind-boggling. I cannot rationalize it. I can't reconcile it. They take out about 8 million kilos of blue mackerel.
For such a beautiful fish, like we were lucky enough, we're catching some really nice, I don't know, 3 or 4 kilo trevally on the bottom yesterday in probably 100 meters of water. Just amazing fish, amazing fight for these young boys that were on, and turned that into some really amazing kai last night. Like trevally for me is such a great eating fish. Sashimi, ikamada, curries, smoked, pan fried. What an amazing fish to eat.
Yep, on every wavelength. You've just taken me back a memory from many, many years ago to Bill Cook, who got me into this whole conversation. I used to do a bit of fishing with Bill Cook, and I remember being holed up at Tom Bowling Bay, blowing about 40 knots from the southeast, and there was no going anywhere, and we hadn't caught many fish, and we got in amongst some of these 8, 9, 10 pound trevallies, and we filled a bin with them, and that's what saved that trip. We came home with a bin full of the best, which we duly smoked and did all the other things with. Yeah, so it's irrational what's going on out there. This quota management system is throwing so many perverse, sick, unintended consequences at us. So the answer to your question, how do we sort this out? We've got to have an alternative. That is called rescuefish.co.nz, Ika Roora. And at this stage, the minister directed his officials to study it, report back. They did. They reported back. Move along. There's nothing to see here, Minister. You are responsible for overseeing and administering the world's leading quota management system. The fishing industry at a corporate level took another week or two to analyze it and issued their proclamation. They have built a plane out of bananas. It will not fly. They haven't said anything else about rescue fish since then. One dismissive one-liner, no inquiry, no interest in further better understanding. And that is hoping that we, I suppose, like a dog's poo, will dry up and blow away. Well, sorry, the longer we work on this and the more we invest in it, and we're just updating the economic impact assessment and our budget, just so we're clear, the Sport Fishing Council have got $320,000 invested in the development of this alternative, and LegaSea have picked up the other $700,000. Our budget for the next 12 months is $200,000, and that's just further development, polishing, researching it with better available information, and more and more and more outreach. It will only happen when mana whenua decide that that's what they want. It's as simple as that. There's no other way of, there's no other pathway. Remember, it was shares in the total allowable commercial catch of this, that, one thing and another that we used as currency to settle Te Tiriti o Waitangi grievance with the September 1992 signing of the Treaty of Waitangi Fisheries Settlement Deed.
Yeah.
And they settled for, as they've been doing consistently, for a fraction, a small fraction of what they perhaps ought to have settled for. So, to put it really bluntly, we are going to have to renegotiate the Treaty of Waitangi Fisheries Settlement Deed, and we can afford to do so. And we can afford to do much better than we have done. And we need to do that. We need to do the right thing. We need to strike a fair price for the buyout of the quota. There's no solving one grievance by creating another. This is not Rhodesia. We have to buy it out. We have to instigate the quite complex arrangements that rescue fish embody, which is a permitting regime, competitive bidding, resource rentals. Fishermen own the fish, free to sell those fish to anybody they like. In fact, they're obliged to sell them for the best possible price that they can. And that requires a bit of adding value in order for them to be competitive. Otherwise, they'll miss out when they come to re-tender their permit every 8 years.
Yeah.
And those fishermen are going to be looking for economies, i.e. local. They need to be efficient. They need to be using, they need to innovate, because they're certainly not going to be trawling. There will be no mobile bottom contact fishing methods. End of story. Get off the bottom.
Yeah.
The benthic environment is sacred. That's where everything starts. And the notion of trashing that indiscriminately day after day after day, so archaic. That's just got to stop. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Oh, you've set me off. Rescuefish.nz.
I love the concept of rescue fish, and I think, you know, with the quota management system has been upheld as I guess an excuse for so long on so many things. Like I'll take scallops probably as the perfect example. And you'll probably know I'm reasonably vocal, Scott, when I see stuff I don't like, and I haven't liked what I've seen the commercial fleet doing to Ep2 Bay in recent years. But every time I bring it up, and even amongst recreational fishermen, people have said to me, "Well, they're doing, you know, what they're doing is legal, and it's all part of the quota management system. Just leave them alone." I think, and even the alarm bells have been going for a little while now, and our public servants been doing nothing, and it's finally taken the recreational sector, the locals, and specifically Joe Davis from Ngāti Hei, to actually stand up and go, it's not okay. And recreational fishermen have done something. We've left the scallops alone at the start of the year. We're just about to open the commercial season again tomorrow. Do you think the commercial sector is going to honour the rahui on Ep2 Bay scallops, or in fact anywhere in that area? Because the main bed is Ep2 Bay, but let's face it, the Coromandel scallop fishery is in not that great a shape. Should the commercial sector do what the rec guys have done so far this year and just leave it alone?
My intuition says that they're reasonable people. They're probably really decent people, and they're probably smart enough to not dredge Ep2 Bay. If they do so, make my day. You can't buy publicity and outrage like that. But that's not going to serve us by having a gigantic shit fight. We don't want to spend our lives down trowing people. Yeah. So I'm an optimist. I reckon they'll leave Ep2 Bay alone. I do believe they'll take their silly method of dredging and go out and try and find some scallops. They'll do what they're famous for, which is discover and destroy. That's the history of scallop fishing throughout New Zealand. Find a bed, then annihilate it. And now, using technology, the GPS and the sounder and all the rest of it. They can do things which their predecessors were not able to do, and they'll just mow it down. So I think they will go dredging. I don't think they'll do it in the rahui. They know that there is a desire and intent on the part of community and mana whenua to put in place a Section 186 temporary closure for the eastern seaboard of the Coromandel. And they know that there is an outrage on Aotea, Great Barrier. The little fragile little beds of scallops over there just got a hiding last summer. They know that the little barrier beds are decimated. So there's my answer. I think they will give respect to the rahui, just because I think they're reasonable people, and there is a bit of background there. You got some new entrants who perhaps didn't know what they were doing or didn't have enough information when they made their decision, their commercial decision to invest in commercial scallop harvesting.
Yeah.
That's a bugger, but hey, it's a commercial decision. That's all it is. They haven't got some sort of a sacred right to make money, or we all make good decisions and we all make bad decisions. That's called business. So that's my answer about scallops. We have to
nothing on the topic of scallops, because it's a topic dear to my heart. There's probably no seafood I love more than scallops, and there's probably no place that I'd rather be parked up eating a fresh scallop straight out of the ocean than Ep2 Bay. I just hope we can still be doing that in 30 or 40 years' time.
I'm confident we will. Do you understand fecundity? That word,
yes.
FECUND? These marine animals are very fecund. They have the ability to replace themselves. All we have to do is leave them alone. I'm often asked, what's your take on fish enhancement, on setting up a big tank and spawning fish and then letting little ones go into the ocean? And my standard answer, because that's what we do with trout. That's the whole acclimatization conversation. My standard answer has developed over time for saltwater natural environment is just leave them alone for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that in the snapper fishery on the west coast.
Yeah.
This rather quite sudden and dramatic restoration, if you like, or recovery of snapper on the west coast. They've had warm water. Thankfully, the Maui dolphin has seen their trawlers spat offshore further and further and further. 3 times they've had to move further offshore, opening up a safe passage, if you like, a corridor for juvenile snapper to go up and down the coast and find another place to feed and spawn. That's what these animals do. And suddenly we've got snapper 8 bouncing way back. Pity about the Gurnard, John Dory, Hapuka bass, the rest of the mixed fin fish assemblage. God knows what's going to happen to them if ministry and industry get their want, which is to double the total allowable catch and have a massive increase of quota available for commercially fishing snapper. That's only going to put more pressure on a whole bunch of other species which are in crisis. But because here we are back with the quota management system, single stock assessment, nonsense, no ecosystem-based thinking, and they just stubbornly refuse to acknowledge the state of all these other animals that swim, live, cohabitate with the snapper. I've only got a few more minutes. But
Okay.
I'll tell you what, I'd love to have another go. Your line of questioning is really beautiful. Thank you, Carl. And your listening skills, much appreciated. The attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Ka pai, bro. Thank you. Really appreciate you unleashing me, letting me rabbit on, and giving me.
I love it, Scott, and I love the wealth of information that you retain, and even just some of the quotes you've rattled off, like that you can retain that information, is something I applaud. Something else I also applaud is you may be Pākehā, but you've got definitely got a foot in the Māori world. Quote that stuck with me that I heard this week is, we're all indigenous to this planet. You may be Pākehā, but definitely making a conscious effort to bridge the gap, which I applaud, and I think we all need to be doing that.
Thank you. Well, there's such a wealth in this Te Ao Māori, this Maori worldview. And again, I want to say thank you to the people who took me into their realm and trusted me. This phenomena or realm called Mangaakitanga. Let me quote Whatarangi Winiata. Behaviour that acknowledges the mana of others as being of equal or greater importance than one's own, expressed through hospitality, generosity, araha, and mutual respect. Only by behaving this way can we expect to elevate the status of all, thus building unity. And that building unity through humility and generosity, that sacred obligation to care for people, that Mangaakitanga has been such a powerful and meaningful philosophy value for me for the last 15 years. And it's just beautifully codified. I started off by acknowledging my mum and dad. They practiced Mangaakitanga naturally, intuitively, instinctively, but they didn't actually codify it to the extent that I've learned it more later in my life. So I'm a big fan of Mangaakitanga. It's an obligation. It's a sacred obligation. If you get it wrong, if you understand it and abuse it and miss the boat, then that gives rise to another obligation called utu. And that's a deep dive into Te Ao Māori. The how does humble, generous reconcile with that scary utu zone? And that might be the subject of another podcast. We could really have a deep dive there. Yeah.
I probably where I'd like to wrap up, Scott, is LegaSea's intricately interwoven with the club sector in New Zealand and New Zealand Sport Fishing Council, which I've been part of for many years. I'm probably less and less personally, just as my philosophy changes on fishermen, concerned with hanging fish up at a gantry or fishing for club records or catching a fish on light line. I'm probably more, one of the things that really appeals to me is the link between well-being and catching a fish, eating a fish, utilizing the whole fish and cooking it up. Where do you see that engagement going long term? Is it, do you think I see LegaSea really being the glue behind the recreational sector going forward? How do you see things?
LegaSea has been given a license to be the public outreach and fundraising brand of the New Zealand Sport Fishing Council. In 2011, the Option 4 movement was recognised as having reached its use-by date. The Sport Fishing Council recognised the need for it to expand its reach way beyond its own 57 clubs, 35,000 or 34,000 members back then. And so they took a leap of faith as a board and allowed for LegaSea to get underway. So we are a wholly owned subsidiary entity of the New Zealand Sport Fishing Council, and the governance and accountability is sheeted back to them. They are ultimately the ones who are holding the liability. And so I have to acknowledge the Sport Fishing Council. Without the Sport Fishing Council, there wouldn't be a LegaSea. There wouldn't have been an option 4. Without the Sport Fishing Council, there would have been no Kahawai Legal Challenge. And without the Kahawai Legal Challenge, we wouldn't be having this conversation, because it was only in that epic court odyssey, 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, where we hammered them in the High Court, had a strange experience in the Appeal Court, and nailed them in the Supreme Court. Vast expense, money we didn't have. It's only in that action. Once again, I have to acknowledge Ngāpuhi. They came into the High Court fully affidavitted and 100% support of our arguments. And on the other side of the docket was the Ministry, Sanford, and Sea Lords, of whom Ngāpuhi are the single biggest shareholder other than the Japanese. So wow, wow, wow to Ngāpuhi. And so this council of clubs are evolving, like all of us, growing up, learning, making mistakes, getting back on their bike. It's the thought leadership that this council brings to the table. For example, really close to home for you, Eastern Coromandel, Tairua, is the 2019 policy adopted unanimously by the Sport Fishing Council at their AGM, where they're advocating strongly for pink maumau to be included in the bag limit of 20 mixed fin fish, limited to 3 fish per person per day, and to be added to the schedule of reef species not for sale commercially. That's, that's a bingo moment. You couldn't ask for more. The Hapuka bass policy passed the year before last. Magnificent. And wait till you see the new one that's going through for the AGM this year in September, where we make major moves to constrain ourselves. We cut our bag limit in half on crayfish last year. We don't hang sharks up anymore. Shark fishing, the graph, the science, the research, the records that we keep is like this cliff face where we just stopped doing that about 15 years ago. Ongoing discussion around marlin, what's best, how do we manage that minimum weight and club protocol, meanwhile maintaining comprehensive record keeping. Southern bluefin tuna, Sport Fishing Council out there on the ramp working its ass off to do our best to achieve a total catch of public of the southern bluefin tuna, which then gets
I've met the lovely people that are there from before dawn and after dusk, recording the numbers that are coming in down at Waiho. Amazing people.
Good opportunity to acknowledge Christine Almaga year after year, and of course the Sport Fishing Council is, and the entire public of New Zealand is so well served by John Holdsworth, who is humility on a stick. That he defines humble. Wow, his output is enormous. Josh Barclay, Trish Ray, Barry Torkington, all these specialists who are out there batting away for abundance. Remember, that's all we're after. Less catch, more respect, more constraint, more innovation. That is the Sport Fishing Council. That's the part which doesn't get enough airtime. LegaSea is trying to promote that, elevate that, as is the council itself. So I'm a big fan of the council. I'm a board member, so I'm in a conflicted situation. and I'm proud to be part of this bunch of volunteers who give massively of their lives.
Yeah.
You've got one under your nose down there, that Warren Mayer. He's just, thanks to Warren and Dirk Sealing and the magnificent Joe Davies. Yeah, wow. So anyone who's listening, who's made it this far, who feels inclined, a contribution to LegaSea will see your donation, your contribution go straight through to the Sport Fishing Council. That's what we do with all of the LegaSea legends and public donation and unaffiliated club contributions. It goes to the Sport Fishing Council the month after it's received, where it's carefully administered and invested in advocacy, research, education initiatives. It's not about trophies. It's not about IGFA, any of that stuff.
Yeah.
That's the club's business, and good luck to them. So yeah, I hope that's a good answer to your question.
Totally. What say I give you the day off tomorrow, Scott, and you don't have to do any of this, and you can just have a day off to hit the water. What would you do? Who would you take? What would you cook up at the end of the day?
My happy place is the little slice of paradise Mum and Dad left my sister and I at Kawo, not cow wow. There is no cow or wow in Te Reo Māori. Kawo, one of the hardest words in the history of the world, I find, to say properly. Kawo. I'd be up there in a shot. I would get the net out and I'd catch a bucket of piper, takake, and I would then eat those piper. I don't think there's a better fish in the water. It's my totem. That's what I've been doing all my life. And I do not fillet my piper. I cook them whole.
Yep.
And I cook them hard, because there's nothing better than a crispy piper tail. Then a walk on the beach with Judy Gilbert and the Criminal Terriers. That's what I dream of. That's my happy place. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks very much for talking today, Scott. Once again, thank you on behalf of everyone out there in this great country that loves to go and catch a feed and cook it up for their whānau. Thank you very much. And it's been awesome talking. And I think we need to go have some time on the water one day.
Yes, please. I'm hanging out for that. And I'll be bringing a couple of young people who are not as fortunate as you and I. I'll be taking a leaf out of Gavin's book. That's a big wow for me.
Yeah.
Doesn't get better than that. My rowdy mates, the larrikins, who I've been accustomed to going fishing with for the last how many bloody years? Too many. I think
I had them on the boat with me at the start of this year, to be honest.
Well, they'll have to find their own way down to the water, I think. I just love what you talked about with Gavin. That's an eye-popping moment for me. Thank you. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Thanks for your time. See you later, Tony.
Bye-bye.